Jim.
Is Jim Schaefer online?
No, not that. No.
Yeah, he texted me. I'll bring him my phone
Okay.
as best I can.
So it's October 23rd,
You got power to them.
2023. So got a lot on our agenda tonight. Junior high auditorium lighting is the first item. Updated pricing from Pittsburgh Stage. I'm going to sort of pace us here because we do have a lot to get through. So, Tom has to listen.
He's talking to Jim.
Okay.
He's on the
Just
phone.
give me about the meeting.
So
Okay.
Tom will get maybe one or two
Yeah, it's
comments.
from
and then-
Okay, we have that in our packet. I think, yeah.
He's
Everybody
gonna-
has this, right?
He's going to join online.
Go ahead.
Well, this is really a carryover item from last week's Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting where we talked about just the system over the junior high, how it's aging, how it's hard to find light bulb replacements for what is over there, and it's only going to get harder. So what really Mr. Karcher and his team over there, as well as Cheney, have been looking at is what it would take to really replace a system that we currently have, which is, what do we figure,
1996.
1996 was
It
installed.
wasn't done during the renovation. It was, for whatever reason, it wasn't included in the renovation.
The gentleman from Pittsburgh Stage couldn't be here tonight with us. He is more than willing. He is able to come November 6th to the academic committee to really answer some of the questions.
They're coming on this coming Wednesday at
They're
noon to the junior high.
Okay.
So to look at the system. So that I got an email from Cheney saying that.
Okay, good.
So I would encourage us to. That would be the most useful time. There's a whole bunch of stuff on this list I don't understand.
Yeah, and I think it'll be then, we can always have him come back and to a committee meeting to really answer the board's questions. But really what we wanted to do tonight was kind of talk to the Audit and Finance Committee meeting as to what kind of price tag we're looking at for this project. So Mr. Percher really did work with the Pittsburgh Stage to get an updated cost, and I will let him kind of talk about that.
Yeah, so I put together a presentation just because I wasn't sure who was all going to be new. I don't need to go through it for sure.
Let me jump in. Okay. Let me jump in.
One time you get one jump in.
Okay. There's a bunch of things on here that'll be explained on Wednesday. And why we're replacing 120 lighting fixtures in the ceiling. I'm a little puzzled by when they're all A-bottom fixtures. There's stuff in the band room that's on this list. So once we understand from them what they're seeing and what's going on, I think it would make this discussion more reasonable. I'm certainly not willing to commit to, and also the number at the bottom is confusing. I believe it's a 337 number, not a 440 number. But that needs to be clarified.
So I talked to Ken Feck is the contact at Pittsburgh Stage. So I talked to him after last week's meeting. So the first number, the 337, is for all the stuff on this list. The estimated electrical installation is you have to hire an electrician to do a lot of work with this, and Pittsburgh Stage is not an electric company. So he said some school districts hire their own electricians, people they work with. Pittsburgh Stage subcontracts their own if the school district wants to go that way. So that 103 is the estimated additional cost for their electricians to do the stuff that's above there.
There's a line item right here, this is electrical installation.
That's the TBD. I think that's why it says TBD. I was confused by it at first too, but it's 440 is the all in with this here. However,
So the total is actually 440.
correct. The electrician, the huge, as far as if you want to talk about numbers, what do you want me to talk
Yes, we
about?
want to talk about.
Okay, so the big ticket item in the $100,000 electrician cost is the house lighting fixtures. So what they quoted in this was to replace every fixture in the house, which requires new wire to be run to it, which running the wire is going to be a giant job. And the wire itself is $5 a foot. That's what I learned between last week and this week. If we decide we don't want to update the house lighting to be able to have each individual light controlled individually, which I don't think we need to do. There's an adapter that they can put in our current fixtures, which costs more than a new fixture that's quoted on here, but you don't have to do the wiring, so you save a ton of electrician cost. He was estimating about $40,000 of electrician costs would be saved by not putting in this DMX system into the house. I know it's hard because all these words are foreign to everybody, but I don't know if I can help explain any of that
So
a little bit
you
better.
just said every single, is that everything on this list then? Yeah, I see blue color side,
the state-
fixtures, wall accents.
Right, so the whole auditorium system is tied together. And it's all driven by this thing called the dimmer rack. Dimmer rack's this blue box that sits on the third floor, and it drives every light that works in the auditorium, stage lighting and house lighting. None of that was touched whenever they did the renovation. What got us to this point was that we were going through house lights very quickly. Each bulb lasts 750 hours. During the pandemic, we were in there almost all day, every day. And so we were going through bulbs like crazy. So that kind of got this like, hey, we should like look into updating our house system because it uses incandescent bulbs, and incandescent bulbs are being phased out. And actually, that was an update I shared with the board last week that the Department of Energy has made the kind of bulbs that we use in the auditorium illegal to produce as of August 1st of this year. So it's just like, it's like something, we're not in an emergency, like, oh my goodness, the stage lighting doesn't work at the junior high, but it needs to be on the radar of something that needs to be replaced eventually because incandescent bulbs are going away. There are 2 school districts in our county that are in the same boat. United is doing their auditorium. Next year, Penns Manor's trying to make theirs happen. It's moving to LED. And so whenever you replace one part of the system, it impacts the other part of the system. So our stage lighting is also old and incandescent, and it works fine, like the lights go on and off now. But if you were gonna update the house, it's tied together with the stage. So it would make sense to update the stage as well.
Were you expecting this to happen this year?
Like I said, I'm just
So you
sharing.
haven't, there's no schedule that you've.
Correct.
Well, he was here last year.
I've been,
Or even 2 years ago,
it's
maybe.
been like a year and a half I've been like
Yeah.
sharing.
Right. And that's why it got the priority 1 on our list
On
of
our
projects.
divergent.
That's how it got up. Yeah. So this is probably the 3rd or 4th time you've come and talked to a committee.
Yeah, I think so. I tried to summarize that if you click on the link on the agenda today, I like summarize that timeline because I do, for some people this is new, but we've been in it for a little while.
So, we did replace the curtain, didn't we, a couple of years ago? I
Yeah,
remember
the
John
same-
Barber was on the board, yeah.
Yeah, the curtains at the junior high were all replaced a couple years ago.
So this is just about the lighting.
This is all the lighting, yeah.
And I'm just curious, 2 things. What was our old estimate? And then your old estimate had like a phase 1 and phase 2.
Right, I think it
broken out,
was-
And it was cheaper to do them both together.
Right. I don't remember the exact quote last time. I want to say it was like 303,000 maybe. And then went up maybe this 30,000 on this top number here. So an option you can do,
303,000 plus the
let's say like,
And is this 440s for both phase 1, phase 2?
correct, this is everything.
Okay.
This is the whole thing. It says it was a fast turnaround. He asked, how much do we need? And I said, how about just do the together budget?
And it's cheaper to do it that way, the last estimate.
Right, so when they did the high school in 2005, they did it the phased approach. They bought a new dimmer rack and updated the stage lighting. However, back then LED lights were crazy expensive. So the high school has new stage lights, but they're incandescent as of 2005. At some point, I'm not sure when,
The house lights are also incandescent. In
the house lights are, they're LED now. I'm not sure when that happened, but the LED, I don't know the timeline, I wasn't here for that, but.
So the house lights in the high school are LED.
Mhm. The stage lights are still incandescent because they did the phased approach. So they got like, it's like half, the high school is basically halfway done.
Did they do the house lights during the ESCO project?
They could have. That would make
That would have
sense.
that would have made somewhat sense.
Yeah, like an energy saving, because there is an energy saving to
Well,
all this, but
let's throw out something else then while we're here. Is we could consider doing another ESCO project. and replace the fluorescents that we put in with LEDs now.
Jared, what do you think of that? Is that something that's doable or not?
I mean,
It'd be an easy question to ask Constellation.
we have numbers from, was that 2 years ago? We had the conversation and we're on the verge of doing an ESCO project.
You have to have so much.
You have to have so much in savings, and I don't think, the lighting was some savings, but, we could look at what those estimates were
Well,
back then.
it may be useful, it may not, I'm not sure, but in terms of the budget, if you do the adapter, for example, which you said, did you say 40,000?
Yeah, he was
Trimming.
all estimating because they're not, the electrician is coming with him on Wednesday, but yeah,
So you have a better idea.
we'll have a better idea on Wednesday.
I'd like to know that adapter works a long time, correct? It wouldn't be something that we'd
No, I
have to be
think
replacing.
We have our current fixtures, like these recessed lighting, they'll screw in an adapter, and then the new LED bulb will go into that adapter. And then that's just how it would be. And
Oh, I
that would,
see. Okay.
that would still be dimmable.
Yeah.
Because that was the other option, I think Dr. Schaefer was saying, can't we just have the lights turn on and off? Which that is an option too, but of course, with such a beautiful space, I would not advocate to turn our auditorium into a on-off light switch facility, just because of how nice it is. It's a beautiful,
Yeah,
I tell the kids all the time, like, the most beautiful auditorium in Western Pennsylvania.
It's historic.
So,
Yeah.
although you've been here in the past, the sense of urgency is primarily being driven because the incandescent light bulbs are soon or will soon be unavailable to
That's not,
replace them with.
that's not true. There will be no more incandescents produced in this country. We will now import them from other places at some substantial costs.
Well, you can probably
Well,
keep
what-
them
what-
in until you need to change them.
Well, where I'm going with this, Tom, is I want to make more work for this guy, okay? Because, sometimes when the federal government makes certain things go away, they provide funding to help ease that. And so my question would be, the fact that they've made this go away, we're looking at a $440,000 expense that we maybe wouldn't have to do right now. Okay, is there some sort of grant funding out there that, because incandescents are going away, and particularly because we are another taxpayer agency, the school district, is there any kind of funding at the state or federal level to help ease this process? So,
Do you know if United Valley had any success with, did they
I don't know, because
Pursue
they're doing like
it
a
or-
full auditorium renovation along with it, so I'm not sure. We've been working with Penn's Manor, I know we tried to potentially work together with them as far as like, if we bought more materials in bulk. It was just, it was gonna, seemed like that was not gonna really work out. Yeah, I haven't heard of anything like that.
No, we can reach out to, Pittsburgh Stage may know.
Yeah.
There may be some other people who know.
You may want to give Byron Stauffer a call.
Yeah, I mean,
There's,
I just got a letter today from the state saying, guess what, people, that you're working for the state, you're not gonna get paid until the Senate passes the budget. Okay, and they're saying, we're sorry for the inconvenience. And so every one of my state-funded projects right now, the contractor's $500,000 out of debt that the state's not writing checks on. And we're gonna, if they have funding, look it up, but I'm a little grumpy with the whole
Well, yeah.
state funding this week.
Tom, I understand you being grumpy. That's not a problem, okay? But, and whether it's the state or the feds, if the feds are the ones that made it go away in the first place, is there some funding to help make this transition, particularly for institutions that are not caught in the.
The concern that I have, and we have to move on here because we've got sports funding to talk about, which we could be here all night, but is that we've got a lot of requests on our table. So I think we have to think seriously about whether or not this is a fair number in terms of the budget, if you've got it, how you could figure it out, and to what extent could we take maybe 20% off of it with his idea or something like that. So I don't think we're ready for any kind of a motion, are we?
That's up to the board. It's a placeholder on capital reserve.
Not
It's-
until we meet with these people on Wednesday.
So on Wednesday, so the next time, when's your committee meet next?
November.
16th.
Okay, that's sooner than audit and finance, so you could,
You could review it and then make a recommendation.
Or we talked about even going Monday on your committee meeting if we want
Yeah.
to move
Yeah,
on it.
if we get some good information,
Okay.
Either
we're
way, the
spending a
work
ton of money
probably is
in the
not getting done
house
until summer.
that just basically turns lights off and on.
say that again?
The work probably won't be getting done until summertime
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah.
But we would need to authorize an order
Yeah.
to get done. And the ESCO across the district is something that I would like to open that can of worms and see what happens. There's 35,000 fluorescent fixtures in this district.
I mean, I can resend the report that, I mean, I
Why
know
don't
it
you
needs
do that?
updated, but it
Why
was
don't you
just
do
right before,
I
right
remember
before
it
Eisenhower,
wasn't
the
so
fire at
simple.
Eisenhower was, we had Constellation in here, did a complete review, was ready to do a project.
Okay, well, if you
At the
send,
time.
send that out. If
There were
we're already gone that
complications,
far,
as
let's
I
take a look at
remember.
it.
I can't remember why we didn't do it. Well, it was a lot of money out. I mean, and we had other problems, which is always true.
They wanted to incorporate some work that we didn't want them to do. We wanted our architect to do. Is that what some of the issue was or something?
I think at the time, there was, part of the ESCO project is you can do stuff that, 15%, I believe, that is not energy savings. They were talking about incorporating at the time, before the fire at Eisenhower, it was maybe incorporating the new office addition into the project as well. I mean, they had a whole lot, I think it was almost like a laundry list of what you want to do and what you didn't want to do.
Okay.
The fire changed everything, so,
Yeah, I don't remember, but I
But-
remember it wasn't gonna be an easy thing to do. We just didn't, it strapped us too much
but I
to
think,
make the
but
initial
but
investment.
I think Tom's right. It's time to at least take another look at it to see what the situation
So you'll
is.
send that out at some,
Mm-hmm.
we can all review it. Okay, so, you probably won't cut back to this committee before there's a motion, so either go to Tom's or Terry's. Okay, the custodial subrate, number two, Jerry.
I wanted to bring this up with the committee. In many ways, I mean, the board is fully
Thank you
aware
very
of the
much.
substitute
Appreciate it.
problems that we're having, not only us, but all districts are having. But we're really facing a short in custodial staff, substitutes, also in full-time position as well. But right now, our sub rate for custodial staff is $10 an hour. It's been that for probably 8 or 9 years. We have, under the last support contract, started to bump up the starting hourly rates for all of our support staff positions. And what I am requesting is that we start to possibly phase in a sub rate for an increase in our sub rate for our support staff, or at least the custodial staff that we pay from district funds, who are the substitutes who are directly employed by the district. Right now it's $10. What I'm proposing is that we shift that to $11 an hour for the current year, and then $12 for 24-25. It still keeps the sub rate below the starting rate for any of our support positions, but it will also help us. One of the areas that we also struggle is during the summer, we use that sub rate to hire any additional summer staff who can help do outside work and help do cleaning in the building. So for the past couple of years, we've been offering $10 an hour for that substitute staff as well. And we've really been struggling to get people to help in those ways as well. Looking at the past, I did kind of just look at the past couple of years of how many hours that we paid substitutes for to come up with that $7,000, roughly, a dollar increase cost the district about $7,000 a year, based on the the average number of substitute hours that we pay in a year. So it's not a huge dollar figure, but I'm hoping that it goes a little bit of ways to help us try and attract some support staff substitutes. I have on there, we'll bring back information on cost to increase other support staff. And what I mean by that is I need some time to take a bigger picture look at all the substitutes that we pay through Kelly Services as to what that would look like if we try to raise that increase or increase that rate, because we are struggling to find substitute admin assistants, paraeducators, teacher aides, and all those positions we pay through Kelly Services. So that's a little bit more involved than simply looking at really our custodial sub rate right now.
And I think it's reasonable to do so.
$10 is just it's hard at that rate right now.
Jared, when you say the 1225 here, is that the others in our district, or is that a comparison of other districts, what they're paying?
That is our lowest starting rate for,
Even now.
right now, it would be housekeepers, which we don't have any housekeepers.
Permanent.
Yes, for our permanent. I don't want to put the sub rate above kind of what our lowest rate is in our contract. So it's still kind of keeping it below that, and that rate will also continue to increase over the next 2 years.
But the sub rate has, I'm sorry, the lowest rate has benefits.
Yes.
Okay, whereas the sub rate doesn't.
No.
Okay, so when we pay them $10, they only take $7 home.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. That's hard for some people to
Yeah,
They
understand.
don't understand.
I'm okay with this increase, but I don't think it's high enough. And
I
I
agree.
suspect your 1225 isn't high enough to maintain those slots. I can take a job at Sheets now, starting at $14, and I get a bonus for working overnight.
Yeah, I mean, our housekeepers, which again is a position, a classification we have here at the district, but we've kind of phased that out. So our lowest position that we really hire for now is custodian, and it's at $13.25.
And that's,
We're not Sheets.
And it'll go up another 50 cents in July 1, and then another quarter. So in 2 more years, it'll be $14 an hour is what our custodians will
Well,
start
yeah,
at.
but the problem, I mean, I'd like to pay them more too, but we have to be pretty disciplined about it. But we don't have, I was just in Virginia, Southern Virginia, on the border of North Carolina, paying $3.29 a gallon of gas. You come up here, so they're making plenty of money. Sheets. I mean, I last paid what,
I'm just,
$3.89?
yeah, my concern though is that we get quality people and we keep
Well,
quality.
yeah, it is. It
And
is.
at $10 an hour, they're not gonna last the whole summer before they find something else
Do
to
you have
do.
anything to say about?
Yeah, especially for the summer workers, that's where it hurts us the most because they get a lot of work done in the summer that they can't get done during the school year. So at that low rate, you're right, the kids can go to Sheets, they can go to Walmart, they can go to these other places and get jobs that are paying better. So that'll help us attract more workers in the summer that'll help our custodians and maintenance staff get
Yeah,
the,
I'm okay with this proposal. I'm just.
you want to raise it higher, I get
Well,
you.
I want to pay attention that if it doesn't, if a dollar doesn't solve the problem, you need to come back.
And I'm okay if the board's
That's
okay if we want to go
reasonable.
to even like $12 an hour and just leave it right there to start. I mean, we're not halfway through the school year, but we are almost we're 4 months into this year already. So it's, that's 7,000, maybe a little bit different, but,
Any objections?
and then we just keep it like that and try it and
Terry, you good?
see how we do.
I'd like to raise it now because we knew this was a
To 12.
problem. Yeah, and I mean, we knew this was a problem. And every meeting, we have resignations of paraeducators and, custodians and stuff. The problem's not going away. And we are below market value.
Yeah, but you're proposing going from $10 an hour for the current sub rate to $12 an hour current sub rate.
That's where I'd be.
But it's not affecting the
Permanent work.
permanent employees at this point in time.
Right, because like Jared says, we don't hire the position at $12.25 anymore. The positions that we hire, the titles that we hire start at $13 a quarter.
Yeah.
So
And
we're
Jared-
still,
And Jared also said he was gonna look at the Kelly rates and come back with a recommendation on
Right.
those also.
because that's a big problem,
But Tim,
paraeducators.
when do you want a motion on this?
I don't have it on the agenda for tonight. If the board, if you're okay with it, we'll approve it in 2 weeks at the next board meeting.
And then by
It's-
then you
it's-
might have an idea of these other numbers.
It's 3 weeks, isn't it?
I was
3
gonna
weeks.
say,
Yeah, I can-
Monday off.
In that time, I can have a recommendation. And I need to reach out to Kelly's too. It's not, I mean, they certainly will take the increase, but I need some information from them to try and get an idea of what that would look like.
Anybody else? Objections? Okay, next. Thank you. Capital reserve transfer for Clark property revenue.
This is just something we do every couple years. We put together just a calculation of what over the past 4 years we have taken in through the car property rental. It's $22,000. So what we've done in the past is just transferred that to capital reserve. And that rental income,
This is the net from.
this is the net. We take off the property taxes on that property. We take off any expenses that we have for that property for any type of fixes that need to take place up there. So that's the net amount.
When did we buy the property, Jared? Do you remember?
I think it was in 2012.
Okay, so we've had it for about 10 years then, 11 years.
We probably, looking back, we probably have transferred somewhere around $60,000 in rental income over the past 10, 11 years.
That includes this.
That will include that, yes.
And I think we paid around 110 for it, if I remember
I
right,
think,
or something
yeah.
in that range.
Yep.
Okay. I'm not sure if the rest of the board or the public understands why we bought the property in the first place. The only access we had to 6th Street was the sidewalk, like 20 feet wide or 10 feet wide or whatever it was. Okay. And the Clars were an elderly couple that had lived in that house most of their adult lives. They got to a point where they needed to go to a nursing facility. And so then they wanted to sell the property. And we bought it for future potential access to 6th Street. And we now have some way of putting a bus lane up through there. Should we do a renovation of the driveway and that sort of thing. That way you don't have to condemn it, and eventually we're going to have the thing paid off where the money we spent we'll get back in renting the property.
It gave us over 100 feet of frontage on those 6. So it gave us a lot of flexibility about what happens in the future.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
And there's a motion on the agenda to transfer that.
okay, so there's no objections. So I'd like to get through number 4 and then also do all of the non-agenda items with a particular emphasis on the credit review for me personally. So if we go next to athletic funding for lacrosse, hockey, and rugby. Jared.
Yeah, part of the budget discussion in the spring was athletic funding for these 3 sports, which the district does not fully fund at this point. There was no decision made as part of the fall or the spring budget discussion. I have been contacted by at least one of the sports asking if the board has made a commitment to fund any piece of the sport this year, which I told them they have not made a decision at this point.
Which team?
I believe it was lacrosse who had reached out.
Really?
So we just need a decision from the board as to
What did we give last year?
That's what I apologize. I thought I had.
I know we.
I have that number if you need that.
Yes.
It's 30,000 was
Yeah.
given between boys and girls lacrosse.
I thought it was 15 per. Yeah, it was 15 for boys and for each of those teams, and then it was 10,000 to hockey and 5,000 to rugby.
And where are we, since we're talking about this, where are we with the track stuff? Remember, they came in with 2 requests. Have those been done?
The track equipment.
The track
That
stuff
was approved.
was approved. Is it finished? Is it all paid for now?
The equipment that was approved, I think it was last summer or something.
The pit.
The pit, yes.
Okay, so we don't have anything outstanding vis-a-vis that bill.
No,
Not currently.
Have we made any progress on the girls lacrosse to be all Indiana kids, or are we still multiple schools?
I do not know that. I don't
Still
know.
club sport, I think.
I know all the boys for the high school level are all Indiana students, and I'm pretty sure that all the girls on the Indiana program are all high school for Indiana. As it comes up through youth, up through middle school, up until 14 years old, it's open as a boosters program that other schools can participate in the program. But once they get to freshman level and above, it's high school Indiana residents only.
Okay, that wasn't true last time we had this conversation, that there were still non-Indiana girls on the team.
Yeah, I can speak for the boys. I know they're all 100% Indiana students. I would have to double check that, but I'm not aware of any outside school.
Yeah, I'd like to get that confirmed too. About the number of, is this all Indiana teams?
Well, we could get an answer from them. So I think our budget can approve the same amount as last year if this is what we want to do. We can go higher or lower or nothing. So those are our choices. Does anybody have any preference? I'd like to give, me personally, I'd like to give at least the same amount as we gave last year.
Did we make a commitment on lacrosse to increase it on a year-by-year basis?
We never made a firm commitment.
Did we make that commitment?
Last year? No.
We
You have-
didn't make a firm.
You have not committed to anything. The motion you made for 22-23 was just a specific amount. There was conversation of doing something like that, but the board did not.
And what did you budget for this year?
The exact same amounts that we gave last year.
Okay.
And in terms of from an audit perspective, we know exactly how the money's being spent, correct?
They're required to submit receipts and everything to me before I reimburse them. I don't just write a blank check out, or I don't just automatically write them.
Normally, what?
They're 15,000.
Do we have any, so in other words, I'm just gonna use a hypothetical, they could take coach buses or they could take school buses, for example, I don't know what the rules, we're not giving them money to take coach buses unless, of course, they're in the state playoffs or something.
I mean,
That might be different.
yeah, I mean, we don't control that side. I can tell they do work with our transportation department typically to arrange transportation so that, they kind of get our discount basically
Okay.
for their bus transportation.
So
Most of the
somebody's
sports
looking
do that.
Yeah, somebody's
Most of these
looking
do.
this over, is that your athletic director, or is that,
Mr. Travis would be doing that. I mean, the athletic director works a lot with them as well to help schedule games and fields and that type of stuff.
so you've found in the past all the expenses to be reasonable and rational?
Yeah, I mean, typically for lacrosse, it's usually coach salary, uniforms, referees, those type of things is what they're putting in for reimbursement. And the athletic director also can review the stuff as well
Okay.
to make sure.
In terms of the foundation that we've talked about, I think it would be nice to try to do an annual fundraiser with all the boosters or something so that these costs can be written down and shared, so that it's not quite as ad hoc as it's been in the past. And, the board of the foundation could be asked for a grant, almost like accepting applications. It might help, and we could agree as a board to invest so much. I think there's a process and procedure to it, and I do think a foundation is sensible at this point. And with American jurisprudence in general, it's what's being done. Just have to figure, somebody, and the board could have board members from this board on it. There's no exact rules as to how big or small a board has. There's a minimum number of directors, but so in terms of this immediate issue, you budgeted that amount. Does anybody have any reason or logic for why you would like to give more, other than that we love these teams? I mean,
Well, I just have a question to pretty much the students who want to be able to play, are they able to play?
it's a good question.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my understanding. And I do.
So it's not a monetary thing holding anybody back from being able to play one of these sports.
Could I speak on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think
So,
they would know more.
prior to last year's funding from the school, in order to play on a high school level, every player was responsible to provide all their own gear, their helmets, their jerseys, and it averaged about $600 per player. So that would drastically reduce the amount of kids that would come up through the youth program to go into high school, because you would go from $150 a year to play to about $500 to $600. With the funding from the school district last year, we're going to purchase uniforms for the program, which they didn't do last year with the previous coach, but we've already got that in place to get those ordered. So each individual player doesn't have to buy an away jersey, a home jersey, or shorts, which is going to reduce the cost drastically per player, which is then going to in turn increase the amount that are able to continue to play.
So what do they have to pay them? What's left?
Well, what they'll do is they'll just pay their registration fee like they pay to play with the school district. Most people, if they have their gear from playing up through the ranks, as long as it's within safety guidelines that's required through Lacrosse USA, they're able to keep that same gear. The only difference is if they change a style or update it where they want to go with the newest thing, that's on them to buy it themselves. So as long as they are within having the proper gear, there's no extra expense when they come to the high school other than what it used to be with having to buy the whole uniform package.
Thank you.
So that's what this part of that, a major part of that fund, I mean, that's close to $4,000 in just uniforms that's going to be taken out of the hands of the players that want to play. They won't have to buy that themselves anymore.
That's 4,000 a team.
Yeah, 4,000 for the boys team specifically. That's who I was speaking on behalf. I know the girls team, their uniforms are still good and they're using it for the gear to get to and from the games.
Yeah, I'm going to say that 10,000 in hockey doesn't really offset the cost of hockey. So hockey's still going to be a cash-heavy sport, and there will be people who will not be able to play hockey. Now, I know the hockey boosters attempt to pay some of those fees to bring some of those kids along, but there's a big difference between the cost of hockey and the cost of.
Yeah, the gear's very similar. Since I've taken,
but the ice time is not.
Yeah. So since I've taken over as the head coach for the varsity program, I've already started reaching out to organizations to see about them providing gear for us as a program, either helmets or pads or stuff like that. That's a process that I'm working for to try to increase, because there's programs through Lacrosse USA, Dunham Sports, for instance, different companies I've taken that upon myself just to try to grow the program as a whole from the youth level up through high school to try to get as much as we can. Because the numbers continue to grow in the program and it'll only get easier to attract the kids to the sport if we can cut the cost down from the very beginning. So that's just something I'm doing to try to help cut the costs for the players. But the funding provided from the school district is definitely going to help with the high school level.
Do we know about rugby?
Rugby
What's the
is,
cost of play, right?
yeah, it's first of all, hockey and rugby are both all male basically. And rugby has even less equipment than you do.
Yeah.
But 5,000 was a token.
A couple of questions. What's your name? I'm sorry.
I'm Jason Beatty.
How you
Sorry.
doing, Jason? Nice to meet you. And you're the head.
Yeah, I'm the head varsity coach for the boys program.
So I guess for you and Jared, has anything changed from last year to this year
Yeah.
with these three organizations as far as how they're set up or anything? They're still, they're club sports.
Yes,
All
sir.
three are still club sports. Nothing's moving there to change that or anything, so.
I know the ultimate goal would be the school sanctioned sport,
Right.
but as of now, we're still the club sport with now partial funding from the school district.
The lacrosse
But you
team is
play
definitely
Yes,
been the
we're a
most,
Whitfield schedule.
yeah, the lacrosse team has definitely been the most succinct and specific in their presentations and in their wants. And originally, we were concerned that what Sue asked about, was there enough money for kids to play?
Yeah.
And they've been, I don't know that they've requested, have there been any requests from either of those teams? The hockey and rugby?
No.
No, okay, so, do we have the consensus that we will give the same amount as last year that's already been budgeted? Can we all say that?
Well, how many kids are in each of these programs? Do we know that?
Currently, high school boys, I have 30 signed up that are going to compete now from freshman to high school. That's before we've even done registration. That's just off-season workouts that we're doing now. I already have 30 players committed, which is 2 down from last year's high school number, but that was the high school number at the beginning of the season last year. The number during the season last year was around 26, 27 players.
Do we know the hockey or the rugby numbers at all?
I'm gonna ask, I don't know, off the top of my head.
Do you have a feel for
Same.
the girls' number?
Yeah.
It was a little less than.
It was like 25, I believe, last year. The total number of players on the girls.
Yeah, but I don't remember whether they still had non-Indiana girls play. It was one of the
I don't
questions.
think there
I don't
is.
think they did,
Yeah,
not last year.
If you can confirm that.
yeah, I wrote it down to double check
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Ross.
I think you're right, okay, and that's a heck of a motion. Yeah. What do you got, Wade?
I'm communicating with Dan, and he said that, first question, girls and boys programs are exclusively Indiana students.
Okay, that's
I'm
good.
working on the numbers now.
And if I could, Julia, I think it's important we fund these. I think the study shows that children, or I'll say students, that are active in sports get in less trouble. So the more sports we can have these children or students participate in, I think is good for the school district and good for the parents. I mean, I've read a lot of studies on that, and that's why I want my grandkids always to participate in stuff. It keeps them out of trouble, keeps them busy. They're not hanging down at sheets, getting themselves in trouble. They're doing something, and I think it's a good thing. It's active, it's getting them out of the house. They're not sitting there on their computer all night or on their phone all evening. They're out doing stuff, and so I think we should support these. And, you know,
My husband's niece has 5 sons, and she says they know where they are. They're on the baseball field.
that's right. It keeps them out of trouble. It really does.
So are you saying increase the some or?
I would like to ask the question, if we increase it by 5,000, what would you do with that extra 5,000?
That would go towards gear for the players, because like right now, the only funding outside of the normal game day expense, travel expense, and the uniforms, there's no other extra funding. Like the boosters provides the extra funding for that. So if there's any extra funding that would be given, like I know the girls this year, they're getting gear, like travel style gear to go as a team. That's something that I was going to try to raise funds for on my own for the boys program. So if there is any extra money that would be given, we could use that towards the team gear, which would go towards the players to wear during the season.
Because I'm sure it's getting more expensive. The referees charge more, transportation's more. So.
And the WPIAL requires a certain amount of referees to be at every game now. Where you used to be able to have 2 referees per game. Last year, they began the rule where you're required to have 3 referees per game. So that's an added expense each game that was put forth before the beginning of that season. So
If I can also add this, my son plays lacrosse. He's played in the program since 4th grade. He's a goalie. Come watch him. Does pretty good, I think. I'm also here to advocate for supporting the lacrosse team. I just want to piggyback off of Mr. Earhart. Also being a teacher in the district, when kids are involved in sports, they are much more focused academically. Their time management is better because they know that in order to play, they have to do well in school. So we as teachers see a better focus when they're involved in different things. And also with an increase in funding, right now as parents, when they have road games, we pay for their meals so they can have something to eat when they're done, whether it's a sandwich, a slice of pizza, just to get them something to eat on the way home. And, buying cases of water, cases of Gatorade, for them as well. So even like some additional funding, like that would also help us as well. I mean, we'll do anything for our kids, but we appreciate anything that the board's willing to contribute to them as well. And again, I encourage any of you, come to a lacrosse game because these guys, they work super hard. Like in a couple weeks, they're going to play 2 tournaments back to back. And they've been practicing every Sunday to get ready for those tournaments. So
they
the boys that
voluntarily
play,
practice
yeah,
every week
they're
this
very
entire summer.
dedicated.
Ms.
Yeah.
Stewart, could you,
Yes.
how much, do you have any idea of how much each parent has to spend in terms of like a booster effort? Because I remember with swim team, they would, everybody would bring in a case of Gatorade or bring pizzas in.
I mean, I've donated, I wish I could give you an exact number, but I've donated numerous cases of water, numerous cases of Gatorade. We each kick in a couple $100s to pay for their meals when they're on the road. Because
Does every team member contribute, or is that just a pool of money?
what we do is when we have away games, parents will say like, okay, for example, me and Mrs. Beatty might say, okay, for this game, we're gonna pay for all their food. Well, till it's all said and done, for their beverages and their food, it's a couple $100s, between the 2 families, and we split the cost. So, I mean, I will say, we do have to budget for that, what game you have to pay for, and you have to plan to have that money. So, I mean, extra funding is nice, but we're prepared that that's what we have to do to support our
And
kiddos.
what do you think overall it costs the parents independently? Would you say it's $200? I don't know if these tournaments, if you have to spend over somewhere or at a hotel or what, or if you bring them back all on the same day, I have no idea.
Well, like this year, the tournaments are a little different because they ended up being back to back. So we are doing one tournament in Bethel Park, and then the following day we're going to be in Wheeling, West Virginia. Those were all optional, so those are not through the program. We all knew that going in that it would be an added expense above the season. So during the season, we know our schedule. There's no outside expenses during the season for tournament play. So tournament play is just extra time to help prepare us as a team. I know prior to this year being the coach, as a parent, like Mr. George was saying, you would probably average about $250 a parent in extra fees that we volunteer to give just to help the program and the kids.
Exclusive of tournaments.
Just for away games and things of that nature.
Because figure when the kids travel, to get them each a meal, it's about $10 a head. So it's about $300 to feed the team on road games. And then we always give them a couple cases of water, a couple cases of Gatorade for the bus. I mean, they bring their own water bottles and stuff. So I would say it's probably fair about probably between anywhere from $150 to $175 if you're signed up for that away game.
And there's
for each
typically 10
set of
away
parents.
games per year.
Right.
Julia, Jim Schaefer raised his hand.
Jim Schaefer?
Yeah, he's
Oh,
on-
he's on the phone.
Yeah.
Hi, Jim. Go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just wanted to put in my 2 cents. I think I'm also in support of funding these teams. For the teams that we don't offer that colleges do, we've seen examples of lacrosse and rugby scholarships offered to these students. They wouldn't have that opportunity if these sports didn't exist. And I think that's an important function of the school, is to get our students to the next level of education, and scholarships certainly help that.
And probably an occasional hockey player too.
Is that the same with club sports as for recognized sports?
Do you have any numbers, Wade?
Thanks, Jim.
Not yet.
Not yet.
And there's nothing on the agenda tonight, so any information, in order to keep the meeting moving.
There's nothing on the
Yeah,
agenda.
we've got,
No.
we've got to get moving.
Yeah,
Cindy, go
I like
ahead.
to advocate that if we're going to increase, we increase lacrosse because it's both boys and girls. Leave the other two float as they said.
Cinda?
So you said that a high school student, any high school student can play, that money's not an issue.
Yeah.
But for the younger students, they have to come up with like $150?
Yeah, the normal registration for Pee Wee, which we used to start Pee Wee at 3rd grade, but last year we actually started as young as 1st grade. So we're already starting to develop players as young as 1st grade playing lacrosse now, where 10 years ago it wasn't that way.
Are the boosters doing anything for the little kids
Yeah,
who can't afford to play? Are they donating and helping if a child expresses an interest and the parents can't do it? Is there any?
well, what we do to start is we do free pay to play, like free to play events to get them to see if they gauge interest in those players. We also have equipment that we can help with loaning and things of that nature to those 1st year players to see if they like the sport. Then once they end up liking the sport, then the family knows that they're going to have that commitment to say, get their own equipment for that. But we're not going to hold them back by not providing them with the gear, because there's a lot of families that their kids have moved on that have given their gear that younger students would be able to use to try to play the sport to see if they like it before the families need to do their initial investment of buying their own gear.
My assumption is that this is a lot like the Optimist movement. That you hold the fees down as low as you can and get started.
Okay, we have to move along. So we don't have to vote tonight, correct?
No, there's no motion on the agenda.
So can everybody go, let's go around and give me an idea if you want to raise, if so, how much and for what? So Terry, we'll start with you. If you would like to offer more than the current.
I'd like to hear the numbers first, but I wouldn't be opposed to raising it.
I would like to raise lacrosse to, 5,000 more for each one, for the girls and the boys.
So 10,000 more. Can you
Yes.
make a note? So-
Mhm.
So possibility, Terry, I'd like to see the numbers.
I
Tom,
agree with Ron.
Sue?
I'd like to see them go up, but I'd like to see the other two. If we're going to raise lacrosse, I'd like to see also hockey and rugby. And my suggestion is to raise each one $2,500.
So my suggestion is raise them all 10%.
What are you gonna do? Okay, 10%, interesting. And then we'll go
Yeah, I
to-
think if we're gonna give the one, we just out of fairness, really need to give to all to whatever extent.
Wait till you see the numbers though.
Yeah, no. And that's exactly where I was going, Tom, but I want to see the numbers before we actually commit to what that additional amount should be.
We do need to be careful with Title IX.
Jim is up to go. Jim.
Jim?
I kind of like, I definitely want an increase across the board. I kind of like to be fair, and Cinda's idea is very interesting to me, depending on how the numbers look.
Okay. Tom, go ahead, finish up.
I couldn't hear what Jim said.
He likes the idea of a percentage maybe, and he'd like to see the numbers go.
Depending on the numbers.
We already are out of balance with the male sports and the girl sports in Title IX. We need to be careful with that number and we don't get out of whack. That's why I would advocate that we don't raise hockey and rugby until they figure out how to get women.
We did have some calls about hockey when we started that before that somebody, I got several phone calls, they don't need any money. So we need to know like what they're taking in and what those reports say. So I'm not trying to pick on the hockey team. I just said I remember that became.
We don't get any
An issue.
information from hockey because they're a club sport.
Required. Yeah, that's an issue in and of itself, that we don't know exactly what their reserve basis is, or checking accounts, or who's donating. I don't know anything about that, and it gets a little bit tricky. So we'll postpone that, and next we're gonna go to the bond report. So I think everybody has had a chance to read it. It's now 6:23. Anybody have any specific questions that they would like to have answered about this bond sale document?
Julia, I assume that you looked at this and that the bond sales was kind of a surprise number on the interest. Is that not true?
Were you surprised? I was not surprised, yeah.
Their projection was actually higher than that, so.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, it did. We got a cheaper bid than we expected. Yeah.
What was their projected rate? Is that it here, Jared?
5 something.
It was like 5.1 something.
Yeah, I don't have their original when they were back, when
Yeah,
they
it
were
was
in
a
here in
minimum.
September, they had a
Say
kind of a
5.
projection. I don't have that.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it was nice. I wasn't terribly surprised because things have been fluctuating so much. Tom, anything else? Anybody else have any questions they wanted to ask?
You had one question, Joey. Do you get I didn't see your answer on that question you had.
There's a couple of things that I'm interested in, particularly the credit rating, in which they give us an A. First, I'll start out briefly with the rating we got. So it's a good rating. I don't think that's moved since the last bond rating, so it was an A. And I think we had that the last time. I'm curious if in the future you can look at some schools in our region, in the western central region here, or within the wood.
Julia, I seem to remember though that in past bond purchases, that by buying some sort of insurance on it, it significantly raised our rating, like from an A to a double A or an double A to a triple A or what have you. I don't know whether that was figured into this or not. I'm raising it basically as a question.
Yeah, I'm not sure, sir. I can
Well-
look into that.
Yeah, I wish you would. I'd like to know who in the heck in this region is a triple A and a double A district, and what the heck they're doing. I mean, you know, the biggest problem we have is IUP in the contraction of the overall engine of the district. So when they're putting it at 1.6 billion or whatever, I'm like, man, I don't think it's hitting that. Now, the university is starting to show some increase in enrollment, and they're certainly building new buildings and whatnot, but they gave us a fairly positive report. One thing that, you know, and they feel that our amortization is fairly rapid, but one thing they say is that the district's current reserve policy lacks a quantitative minimum reserve level. What was your take on that? Why did they happen to point that out? I don't know.
What page is that on, Julia?
Well, it appears on page 11, and it's part of the credit review. The whole credit review, I think, is pretty interesting. There's a couple of things that I didn't understand how they got to their numbers, but it's in it. There's a bunch of dots. The rating also reflects our opinion of the following. And it says the district's financial management assessment is standard, highlighted by detailed budgeting and monitoring processes. multi-year financial projections, and formalized investment managed policy. The district's current reserve policy lacks a quantitative minimum reserve level. And I'm not quite sure why all of a sudden, I've not heard this before.
So I think the follow-up question to that is, do we need to have a policy?
Yes, exactly. I mean, because it seems to be a criticism. They don't call it that, but it seems to be a little bit of a demerit. Have they ever talked to you about this, Jerry?
They have not, but I would guess, and I'm trying to pull up our board policy right now for fund balance, but I believe that's where we have kind of 8% is what we shoot for.
Yes.
I don't know that there's a minimum.
Didn't know we need one.
And I didn't know we needed one. Now, maybe,
I don't know that you need to have one, but if you're
So-
gonna have one, you'll be held to it.
yes, that's, of course, yes. So I would like to query them as to why, what
Is
their
this-
thinking is.
Is this a situation, Julia, where we need to have Jamie Doyle come back
Well,
and
I think first we
talk
should
a little-
have Jared
Just asked a question.
just ask the question, and then we may need to speak with her.
And this is not
It's
Jamie's
too-
report. This S&P
This
is
is,
not
um,
Jamie.
no, I understand that, but she's our
Financial advisor.
financial advisor, and surely she should be able to give us some input onto this.
The other thing they said that,
And in some ways, we certainly need to know this, because if this is critical to borrowing future funding for Ben Franklin or some other renovation, we should be putting it in place now.
well,
It's not as
Yeah.
critical to the Eisenhower project, because whatever else we borrow for it's going to be very, very, very minimal, if any. But it's kind of more of a longer range planning, I think, trying to figure out what that policy
well,
should look
the
like.
fact that it's in there made me wonder, well, how would we set that? And we'd have to stick to it, as you said, so we would have to leave some cushion in any policy. But if they've got a policy that they've seen somewhere that they can share with us, I'd like to see it, because it's an interesting comment, and I see it, I read it, I don't know why, I see it almost as a negative. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about is they say on that, right above that, operating performance has been stable historically, marked by increases to the general fund reserve, 7.2 million in fiscal year 22, which exceeded 10% of the general fund expenditures during the past 5 years. Is that true? It sounds about right, but I'm not.
Yeah, the fund balance, I mean, our fund balance at the end of 22 is right around the 7.2 million. I mean, it is over the 8% that PDE sets. Our fund, I was just looking at our fund balance policy, does not state any specific amount up or down, a minimum or a maximum. Now, that to me is the way I read it, a little misleading that it increased. I mean, by 7.2. Our fund
Yes,
balance
I thought
didn't
that
increase
did
by
not
7.2
increase.
million.
I know,
It was
I
at
agree. I don't
7.2.
See what the,
It increased to
Yes,
increased.
7.2.
Yeah,
They don't say, well,
that's a little misleading, and
It's a bit- yeah.
seems like it increased that much. It was at that level.
but it may be how they look at it, because the very next bullet point talks about this lack of our policy, quantitative measurement. So, that's why I'm curious about district AA's and AAA's. Do they do this? Do they have a better reserve policy? Is there something that somebody's sort of figured out about money management? Because we are certainly getting to the point in the district where we are stable enough that we can, despite all of the downturn in the local economy and the rebuilding, because I've never seen downtown look better, frankly. That's just downtown. But I mean, so we have alert to policies. We've done all kinds of things that we've contributed to as to whether or not we can maybe finesse this a little bit differently, because the future boards will have to worry about bigger and bigger projects. So those are my
And
comments.
again, the insurance,
Yes,
if
it's
I
interesting.
remember correctly, was one of the ways that they raised the rating was by buying insurance on this.
Well, yeah, naturally. So they get you to sort of fee-based income. So I'm not, yeah, I get that. But somebody ought to be able to answer those questions.
I can certainly ask Jamie Doyle. I mean, she deals with many, many districts, so she would probably have that bond rating or that, the S&P rating. from other districts so we can compare and who they are. And
Very good. Okay, thank you. Is there anything else on this that you would like to know about this report? I mean, read it pretty carefully. I was, well, rate for hire, I wasn't jumping for joy, but I certainly was pleased.
I have a couple of things,
Sure, go
because they do move into C, that debt worksheet. At the top of page 11, it talks about the scaling back some contracted positions and have outlined other programs that would cut if any budgetary pressure should arise.
I don't like the word cut because
Yeah,
we would
I don't
talk
remember
about
doing
rearranging
that.
our investments
You know.
if we have to.
And then it gets, the next line is talking about raising property taxes 2 or 3% a year. And looking at, the debt sheet, like next fiscal year, we're gonna be paying about $500,000 more in debt payment. But then in 2 more years, or 3 more years, it's $1.2 million a year more in debt service for like the next 8 or 10 years or something. So
We're still.
I'm assuming somebody did some figuring to come up with raising taxes 2 or 3% per year because of that sheet you had made up for property tax.
well,
To raise 1.2 million, you have to raise it 4.5%.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
well,
if
and
this is
they're not
boilerplate.
also, this paragraph here is not about how we're going to pay for the debt.
Right.
They get a ton of information from me. They are looking at our budget projection. They are asking, they see the $6 million deficit that we're looking at in 2 or 3 years and saying, how are you going to pay for that? How are you going to come up with that? Because if you run out of fund balance, which our deficit shows we're going to in 2 or 3 years, that can look bad on how we're going to pay for future bond payments.
Yeah.
So they're looking at all that, and I sit down and we have an hour, 2-hour conversation with them as to how are you going to come up and fix that deficit in the future. And part of that is a lot of the stuff that we pay with the pandemic money may have to go away. There may be other program cuts. There may be tax increases to pay
There
for
could be
that.
state increases. I mean, I see the 2 or 3 year scenario as worst case scenario because, we sort of have a functioning state government all those times.
And it is, but they want to make sure that we are doing budget projections, that we're not
And
just
that's what-
looking 1 year
yeah.
to the next.
I figured they were making some general assumptions on the information.
Yeah, that 1.2 is what I told them we had remaining in ESSER dollars.
Yeah.
And what we were going to use that for. It really has nothing to do with our debt.
We can certainly learn through a foundation, for example, how we can start offsetting through. It's really something we have to get serious about, not just have a name out there. We've got to figure out how to start putting some reserves into, not from this budget, but we've got to start thinking about how to raise reserves to put into that foundation so that we've got some, I don't want to call it capital, you can't in that type of environment, but certainly we can start to partner more with people that are demanding or need more money. Go ahead.
So, Terry, I understand that you're saying that it goes up to 1.2 million approximately for a good chunk of in addition to 1.2. But that was based on the assumption, I believe, that the local effort was going to drop to 2.5. And when you look at the new local effort, and I'm looking at page 4, okay, we're at about 3.7, we've historically been around 3.5 or somewhere in that general range for our debt service. And then it goes up to not quite 4.1 and stays at 4.1 for 3 years and then drops back down to 3.7. So I think there's about a 3-year bump here where we see that, and I think that has to do with the wraparound function of the bonds, if I'm not mistaken. I would defer to Jared for the definitive answer, but the issue is that based on what we historically have paid, we're only going to, other than those 3 years, we're only going to see $150,000 to $200,000 in increased in our debt service payments.
So,
Total debt payments I'm talking about on this sheet.
It should be the exact same numbers.
Right, but like in year 2930,
right.
we were forecasting we'd be paying 2.6.
Mhm.
Now we're gonna be paying 3.7.
And no, I'm not disagreeing with that.
Where are you getting that 2.6 number? An old
Off
one?
of, yeah,
Okay,
before
okay,
this new bond.
okay. I'm not disagreeing with that we're paying more than what we forecasted the bonds to be at. I'm not disagreeing with you at all there, Terry. What I'm saying is that as long as I've been on the board, we have had debt service, total debt service, cash flow out every year at around $3.5 million. Okay? And I believe that's what it was before this particular bond that we just sold.
Yeah, I'm not
Okay,
disputing that.
So
okay,
we don't see a
okay.
liquidity problem.
So, and Julia's absolutely right with the liquidity issue. Okay? We're only increasing the bond, our cash flow bond payment on an annual basis by whatever the 3.7 is versus what the actual number we're doing now, which is, I'm guessing it around $200,000. Okay, so
And
then
we're both right, I'm gonna say, because
what,
I think with this previous forecasting, we were thinking we were gonna get the Ben Franklin, we were
Right.
gonna get to see some of these other projects. Now it's gonna be extremely difficult to get to those other projects.
what I'm getting at though is to go back to her liquidity point, and that is that from a budgetary issue, the reality is we only have to come up with another $200,000 each year to continue to be solvent in making the payments on the bonds. Is that close, Jared, to conceptually, or am I off base on that?
For the next couple of years, yeah, I think what Mr. Carr was saying, and when you look further down the road, that decrease in bond payments was even steeper. Now, with this new debt, it's not as steep as it was
Yes.
prior to the new debt. But yes, for the next couple of years, the bond payment's only going up, our debt payment is only going up a couple $100,000.
But it's not gonna drop 1.2 million.
Not gonna drop.
But I don't see future projects if they're sensible, if they really put their head to it. I don't see future projects on Ben Franklin as impossible, because if you look at Jamie's or Kim's leverage ratio, we're still gonna be okay. Foreseeably. Now, that page she always shows us where we are. You know what I'm talking about? Leverage
Yeah,
ratio she does. I don't see it impossible for this district to raise enough money, borrowing sensibly and always increasing into the reserve. Those are the first two things, that we can't figure out how to do something with Ben Franklin. That doesn't mean that we're ever going to be able to afford a Taj Mahal. You know, I mean, there's all kinds of factors that could come into it, but I think we're in pretty good shape considering what's happened with the university. That's how I view it. Now, do I think that we've got to be careful with what he said with our cash flow and everything else? Yes, absolutely. That's why we have to at some point consider alternative sources of revenue. And the government's saying you can do it. Here's a foundation, you're allowed to do this. And they're letting schools do it, right? I mean, universities do it all the time. I mean, look at Pitt, and that's its quasi. I mean, my goodness, it's incredible what you can do if you get a fundraiser who's if we can raise, what was it, 88,000 for the outdoor classroom?
It wasn't quite that, but it was 76, I think.
And a lot of most of that raises from large donors. It's great to have the smaller donors, but the big donors come in now, and sometimes a foundation. And I sent you an email about one foundation, that solar crowd. So they're willing to give in large chunks. And you can, also the other one is the playground. They've raised a good bit of money. I went to a fundraiser recently, my goodness, well, a bunch of us went. It was outstanding, the generosity of this community. So it just seems to me that we've got, if we keep our heads down and don't get too much into, I don't like the word cut. I never like that word cut. I think that's like in baseball where you cut somebody. No, you're reinvesting. They don't say that. They say, well, it's baseball. It's the way it is. You're going to reinvest and we're going to get, it's the name of the game and we have to get that. And it's a form of arbitrage, but as far as, do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So keep that
All
in
for
mind.
Foundation, I've been there since I came on this board. I've been pushing it. We need to get moving on that.
Well, we'll need a chair.
We're missing out because
Yeah, we need a chair on.
If I was
Since you
here,
spoke
I
up.
would not have a problem doing that. I feel guilty being.
I think Wade had his hand up.
Wait, go ahead.
Here's some numbers Dan sent. Boys lacrosse 30, girls lacrosse 25, hockey 30, rugby co-ed 30.
Okay. So the numbers are improving.
You said co-ed 30,
Yeah.
but he didn't break it down.
It's football still, so.
Hockey was what?
30.
30.
Thank you, Wade.
You're welcome.
And then,
Asking how many girls at a time rugby.
The last thing after we get into that is the audit update. I would like to know where she is on that leverage ratio, as soon as you get that number from her. With the new indebtedness, of course. Thank you. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? We're a little bit cutting into the executive session, but thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
nice meeting.
Okay.